Is it just me, or is it possible that Angel just tapped out, just did a UFC? I'm good. I'm good.
The cameras were rolling, the crowd was roaring, and in the middle of it all, Angel Reese broke down in front of the world. What was supposed to be another night of WNBA action turned into a spectacle that had fans stunned and rivals smirking. For weeks, whispers followed Reese about her attitude, her clashes with teammates, and whether she truly had the drive to carry Chicago Sky forward. But nothing prepared anyone for the sight of her visibly emotional tapping out of the game.
You're hurting my back. This league is hurting my back. My sorry-ass teammates, all their weight is hurting my back.
Unable to push through as the pressure finally caught up. Some called it weakness, others called it honesty. But one thing was undeniable. The moment shattered the image Reese had built around toughness and confidence. It raised one burning question that won't go away. Was this a breaking point, or the beginning of the end for one of the WNBA's most polarizing stars?
Get suspended for a half game, a weak-ass half-game suspension. We're going to hold her accountable. Okay, then suspend her for the rest of the year. She said, nah, I suspend myself for the rest of the year.
From the very start of her WNBA career, Angel Reese has been defined as much by her larger-than-life personality as by her on-court performance. Known for her swagger, her confidence, and her willingness to call out critics, Reese entered the league with a reputation that made her both loved and hated. But as her career progressed, fans began noticing a troubling pattern when the spotlight grew too hot, or when adversity hit, Reese seemed to disappear at the worst possible moments.
I need to sit out for the rest of the year. Now, am I going crazy? Or didn't she miss the last part of last year too? Wait a minute. Am I going crazy? Or did she miss the last part of Unrivaled as well? What is it with disappearing acts at the end of seasons?
The live game breakdown against the Chicago Sky wasn't the first time people questioned her resilience. Just last season, she missed the closing stretch of critical games, raising eyebrows about whether she was truly committed to finishing strong when her team needed her most. Now, with emotions boiling over in front of a national audience, many are beginning to connect the dots. What stood out most about this breakdown wasn't just the terzet, was the timing. Reese had been suspended for half a game earlier in the season, an unusually soft punishment that already sparked debates about accountability. Instead of coming back with fire to prove her critics wrong, she looked defeated, almost as if she had suspended herself for the remainder of the year.
Where's Angel? What? Angel? They called Angel in out of the bullpen. Nobody there. She's sitting on the bench. Are you playing? Nah, back hurts.
That moment became symbolic of what fans now see as a troubling pattern, a willingness to throw in the towel rather than fight through challenges. Her tears weren't just an emotional outburst, they represented the growing cracks in her relationship with the Sky, her teammates, and even the league itself. And then there's the matter of how Reese handled her teammates. Instead of taking responsibility for her struggles, she often seemed to deflect blame onto those around her, pointed out how she metaphorically ran her teammates over, backed up, and ran them over again.
I ain't getting out there with them sorry-ass teammates of mine. Threw her teammates under the bus. Ran them over, backed up, ran them over again. And then ran them over one more time so she could take off and go down the street.
The breakdown on the court only amplified this narrative, suggesting that Reese wasn't just battling personal pressure, but also alienating the very player she needed by her side. It's one thing for a star to struggle, it's another to publicly fracture the chemistry of an already shaky roster. For Chicago Sky fans, the sight of Reese breaking down mid-game felt like déjà vu. The whispers of a disappearing act missing games, citing injuries that fans struggled to believe suddenly resurfaced.
So, Coach, we saw Angel obviously taking part in the warm-up with the back issue. Was that something that acted up on her during the pregame, or what was the situation that happened on her with the back?
Yeah, she reported it to us during pregame, and so, in conjunction with the medical staff, Angel and the medical staff, it was we wanted to be as cautious as possible. So
the timing couldn't have been worse, coming during a season where the Sky desperately needed unity, consistency, and leadership. Instead, they were left watching their supposed centerpiece crumble in real time. The truth is, professional sports demand both physical toughness and mental strength. While it's natural for athletes to show vulnerability, Reese's breakdown is being viewed through the harsher lens of repeated behavior. To her critics, this wasn't a single moment of weakness. It was the latest chapter in a story of quitting. When things got hard, and that lingering perception is what makes this incident so damaging. But if this moment symbolized Reese's collapse, the reaction it sparked both from social media and from inside her locker room would take the controversy to an entirely different level.
After serving a suspension, Angel Reese has been ruled out for the second half of the game due to a back issue. How did you hurt your back when you didn't play?
The fallout from Angel Reese's breakdown didn't stop when the buzzer sounded. It carried over into headlines, locker rooms, and especially the unforgiving world of social media. What had been a personal moment of tears quickly transformed into a public firestorm. Fans dissected every detail: the way she sat on the bench, the frustration etched on her face, the awkward distance between her and her teammates. It was no longer about a single game. It was about what this moment revealed about her character, her leadership, and her place in the league. At the heart of the controversy was the suspension that came just before this meltdown. Reese had already served what many considered a laughable punishment, just a half-game suspension for previous issues. Commentators mocked the leniency, saying it barely scratched the surface of accountability. But when she followed that up by seemingly taking herself out for the season, critics argued that Reese had outmaneuvered the league itself. Instead of the WNBA holding her responsible, she had flipped the script and decided she wasn't going to play anymore. To some, this looked like an act of defiance. To others, it was pure self-preservation. The real damage, however, came from how her actions were perceived by her teammates. In sports, there's nothing worse than feeling like your leader has abandoned you. When Reese tapped out, it didn't feel like she was just bowing out for herself. Felt like she was leaving her teammates stranded, carrying the weight of a fractured season alone. The whispers grew louder. Reese had thrown her teammates under the bus, and worse, she had done it on live television. Fans replayed the footage like detectives, pointing out the body language of those sitting next to her, the lack of eye contact, the uncomfortable silence on the bench. To the outside world, the message was clear. Whatever unity the Chicago Sky had left, it was unraveling fast. Social media only poured gasoline on the fire. Memes of Reese crying mid-game spread within minutes, often paired with captions questioning her toughness or mocking her for collapsing under pressure. Others defended her, arguing that athletes are human and shouldn't be ridiculed for showing emotion. But the split in opinion only amplified the story, turning it from a private struggle into a national debate. Even casual sports fans who had never tuned into a WNBA game suddenly knew Angel Reese's name, not for her dominance on the boards, but for her tears. The half-game suspension, followed by a self-imposed exit, became the perfect storm of controversy. What should have been a footnote in a long season instead became the defining headline. The conversation shifted from her potential as a rising star to whether she was sabotaging her own career. And just when it seemed the drama couldn't get more chaotic, all eyes turned to the locker room, where her coach and teammates were forced to address the situation. Their words and their silence said a story of its own, one that would only deepen the questions about Reese's future. If the breakdown on the court was the spark, the reaction inside the Chicago Sky locker room was the explosion. Players and coaches were suddenly thrust into the center of a media storm they didn't ask for, and every word they spoke or refused to say was scrutinized for meaning. The question wasn't just whether Angel Reese had tapped out physically, but whether she had also fractured the chemistry of a team that was already fighting an uphill battle. Coach Tyler Marsh found himself in the most uncomfortable position of all. In post-game interviews, he was asked directly about Reese's status, and his responses were measured almost painfully cautious. He explained that Reese had reported back discomfort before the game, and that in conjunction with medical staff, the decision was made to keep her out. On paper, it sounded reasonable, but fans weren't buying it. How could someone warm up, sit on the bench, and then suddenly be too injured to play? Too many Marsh's words sounded less like medical reasoning and more like damage control. Tension wasn't limited to the podium. Observers pointed out that Reese's teammates looked distant during the game, their body language telling its own story. Sitting beside Ariel Atkins, cameras caught a moment where the two didn't exchange a single glance, almost as if an invisible wall stood between them. In the high-stakes world of professional basketball, where trust and unity are everything, that silence spoke volumes. Then came the reports from insiders and anonymous, sources suggesting that some teammates were fed up. They felt Reese's actions had shifted the focus away from the game and onto her personal drama. Instead of preparing for the next opponent, they were fielding questions about back injuries, suspensions, and emotional breakdowns. Trying to salvage a season, it was the last distraction they needed. Social media amplified those cracks even further. Clips of the awkward bench moments circulated widely, with fans speculating about who still supported Reese and who had mentally checked out on her. Memes mocked her supposed injury, while others defended her right to prioritize her health. The polarizing nature of the debate mirrored the split inside the locker room, some sympathetic, others exhausted. For the Sky, this was more than just an embarrassing night. It was a public unraveling of their internal struggles. A roster that already lacked depth and consistency now faced an even bigger challenge: rebuilding trust in the wake of one player's high-profile meltdown. And as much as Marsh tried to downplay the situation, the cracks were visible to anyone watching. But perhaps the most damaging part wasn't what was said, but what wasn't. Teammates who might have rallied behind Reese in another situation instead remained quiet, their silence echoing louder than words. In sports, silence often means fractured trust, and fractured trust can derail an entire season. Still, the bigger question loomed: was this truly about an injury? Or had Reese's reputation for walking away in tough moments finally caught up? To her, the answer would fuel an even harsher round of criticism from fans and analysts alike. While the locker room tension painted one side of the picture, the spotlight soon shifted directly onto coach Tyler Marsh. For weeks, Marsh had been juggling the impossible, leading a battered 10-30 Chicago Sky roster, weathering the fallout. From Angel Reese's controversies and answering questions from the press that no coach ever wants to face, his job description suddenly expanded from X's and O's to full-time crisis manager, and many began to argue that his patience deserved more recognition than his win-loss record ever could. The press conference, following Reese's breakdown, put Marsh on center stage. Asked about her absence, he calmly repeated that the decision was made in consultation with medical staff, emphasizing caution and day-to-day evaluation. To some, it sounded diplomatic, an attempt to protect Reese's reputation while also preserving the team's dignity. But to others, it felt like scripted damage control. Marsh knew the cameras were waiting for any sign of criticism, and he wasn't about to ignite a bigger fire. Yet, his refusal to fully commit to Reese's defense only fueled speculation that even he was growing weary of the drama. What made Marsh's position so difficult was the timing. Coaches are judged not just by wins, but by how they manage adversity, and this Sky team had endured more than its share. Between suspensions, public spats, and now an emotional tap-out mid-game, Marsh had been forced to navigate chaos that most coaches never encounter in an entire career. Some analysts even joked that he deserved hazard pay for the stress of holding the roster together while its supposed star unraveled in front of him. But what stood out most was the contrast between Marsh's professionalism and Reese's unpredictability. While she appeared emotional and erratic, Marsh remained calm, measured, and unflappable. This stark difference highlighted the growing divide between player and coach. Fans watching the press conference noticed it too, pointing out how Marsh seemed to choose his words carefully, as though he was carrying the weight of both protecting his player and holding on to the team's respect. Inside the locker room, his role became even more complicated. Coaches are expected to rally their squads, but how do you motivate players when the biggest star seems to have checked out? How do you restore trust among teammates who feel abandoned? Marsh's leadership was put to the ultimate test, and while he never openly criticized Reese, his silence on certain questions spoke volumes. Many suspected he was biting his tongue, unwilling to reveal the full extent of the frustration building behind closed doors. For fans, this entire ordeal raised a larger question. If the coach himself couldn't rein in the chaos, what did that say about the future of the team? Was Reese too big of a distraction for Chicago to handle? And if so, could Marsh realistically build a winning culture around her presence? As criticism mounted and Marsh continued to absorb the blows, attention shifted back to Reese herself. Because while the coach played defense at the podium, fans wanted answers to the mystery that wouldn't go away. Was her back injury real? Or was it just the latest chapter in a pattern of convenient excuses? The so-called back injury became the centerpiece of the entire controversy, not just because of its timing, but because of how unbelievable it looked to the public. Angel Reese warmed up before the game, appeared loose, and even took part in drills, yet moments later, she was ruled out and seen sitting on the bench, claiming discomfort severe enough to keep her sidelined. For many fans, the question was unavoidable. How does someone hurt their back when they didn't even play? That single inconsistency opened the door for endless speculation and ridicule to her supporters. Reese was being unfairly judged. Back issues can flare up suddenly and unpredictably. Anyone who has played sports knows how a simple movement can trigger a lingering injury. They argued that mocking an athlete's pain was heartless and showed a lack of empathy. But her critics weren't convinced. They pointed to the pattern, how she had also vanished late in previous seasons, and how every setback seemed to come with drama attached. For them, this wasn't about an injury at all. It was about accountability. The problem with credibility in sports is that once fans begin doubting you, every move gets magnified. Reese's absence was dissected frame by frame, with analysts replaying her warm-ups to highlight moments where she looked completely fine. Some fans even compared it to professional wrestling, accusing her of putting on a performance to escape criticism after her suspension. Whether fair or not, the perception began to snowball. What might have been seen as a minor health setback for another player became, for Reese, another chapter in a growing story of quitting when the pressure rose. Even worse, the controversy fed into the broader narrative about her priorities. Fans noted how she seemed more focused on social media, endorsements, and building her personal brand than grinding through the season with her teammates. The so-called back injury looked less like bad luck and more like a convenient excuse to step away while protecting her image. In a league that prides itself on toughness and resilience, this was a devastating hit to her reputation. Inside the locker room, the injury excuse didn't do much to ease tensions either. Teammates who had been carrying the load all season were left questioning whether Reese had checked out. When a player claims injury, it requires trust that they are being truthful and not abandoning the team. The body language on the bench, the silence from fellow players, and the guarded responses from Coach Marsh all suggested that trust was eroding fast, and for the league itself. The optics couldn't have been worse. Instead of showcasing rising stars in intense matchups, the headlines revolved around one player's drama. Every missed rebound, every awkward sideline clip, every meme mocking her back pain made it harder to defend her as the future face of the WNBA. By the end of the night, the question wasn't just whether Reese was really hurt, it was whether her credibility as a professional athlete had taken permanent damage. And as speculation swirled about her future, some began to wonder if the only path left for her was outside the WNBA altogether. When the whispers about Angel Reese's injury started to sound less believable, the conversation quickly turned toward her future, and for many, that future might not be in the WNBA. Analysts and fans began speculating about whether Reese had already burned her bridges in Chicago, and perhaps even across the league. The rumors grew louder. If she can't stay healthy, can't stay out of controversy, and can't maintain the trust of her teammates, would another team really take the risk of bringing her in? That's when the talk about overseas opportunities started gaining traction. Some commentators sarcastically suggested that the Mexican League is calling, while others pointed to Saudi Arabia, where women's basketball is slowly gaining traction and athletes often receive higher paychecks than they could earn stateside. The comparisons weren't meant as compliments, they were meant as warnings. Reese was being lumped into the same conversations as players like Kennedy Carter, who once had her own turbulent run in the WNBA before being forced to rebuild her career abroad. The message was clear. If Reese doesn't change course soon, she could find herself following a similar path. Money, of course, is always part of the conversation. Reese has made no secret of her love for endorsements, branding, and the business side of her image. Overseas leagues, especially in Europe and the Middle East, often offer financial incentives that rival or even surpass what many WNBA stars earn. On paper, the move might make sense, but critics argue that no amount of money can repair the damage to her reputation if she leaves under the cloud of controversy. For a player once touted as one of the WNBA's rising stars, being forced out so early would be a devastating indictment of her career trajectory. What's even more concerning is how much this discussion has overshadowed her actual on-court talent. Instead of talking about her dominance on the boards, her hustle plays, or her potential to grow into a cornerstone player, the narrative has shifted entirely to her behavior. Every time Reese trends online now, it's rarely about basketball, it's about drama, missed games, and emotional meltdowns. Overseas opportunities may provide an escape, but they also serve as a reminder that she has failed to cement herself in the league that was supposed to be her ultimate proving ground. For Chicago Sky fans, this possibility feels like betrayal. They invested hope in Reese as a long-term building block, someone who could help turn the franchise around. Instead, they're watching her name float in conversations about leaving the country altogether. To make matters worse, those discussions aren't being framed as bold career moves. They're framed as exile, a consequence of her inability to manage the expectations of professional sports in America. And this is where the story takes its sharpest turn. Because beyond the talk of contracts and destinations lies a deeper, more uncomfortable question. Does Angel Reese even want to play basketball anymore? For many, the breakdown on live television wasn't just a sign of physical or emotional exhaustion. It was a glimpse into an athlete whose passion for the game may no longer match the image she projects. That question would fuel the next wave of debate, as critics began pointing to her growing interest in social media, modeling, and influencer culture as the real reason basketball now feels like her second priority. By the time the overseas rumors began swirling, a new narrative had already taken hold. Maybe Angel Reese simply doesn't want to be a basketball player anymore. For months, critics and fans alike noticed her increasing focus on her image outside. The hardwood her Instagram posts, her TikTok presence, her modeling shoots, and her brand endorsements. It all painted the picture of an athlete who was more interested in being a celebrity than in grinding through the day-to-day demands of professional basketball. Her live game breakdown only amplified this perception, making it seem as though the sport had become a burden rather than a passion. The line between athlete and influencer has always been blurry in today's sports culture. But for Reese, it feels like the balance has tipped entirely. Instead of headlines about double-doubles or clutch performances, her name trends because of dramatic sideline clips, fiery social media spats, or glamorous appearances away from the arena. For a player still early in her career, that's a dangerous trajectory. The WNBA is stacked with stars who built their reputations on toughness, consistency, and leadership. Reese, on the other hand, is being portrayed as someone chasing the limelight instead of embracing the grind. What makes this debate sting even more is that Reese has the talent to succeed. Her college career proved that she could dominate when focused, using her size, athleticism, and energy to change games. Yet in the professional league, the conversation isn't about whether she can develop into an all-star, it's about whether she cares enough to try. The emotional tap-out mid-game reinforced the idea that her priorities lie elsewhere. Fans who once cheered her on now accuse her of treating basketball as a side hustle, while building her brand as the main event. Some analysts have compared her role in the league to a character actor in a big movie. She might be on the roster, but she isn't carrying the story. Instead, she lingers in the background while the real stars do the heavy lifting. It's a harsh comparison, but one that resonates with those who feel Reese is content with attention rather than achievement. Being a side character isn't inherently bad. But it's not what was expected of someone who came in with as much hype as she did, of course. There's another side to the argument. Supporters claim Reese is simply capitalizing on opportunities that modern athletes can't ignore. Why shouldn't she build her brand while she has the chance? Why shouldn't she model, post, and expand her influence? The problem, however, is perception, and right now, the perception is that basketball is her lowest priority. When teammates and fans sense that, it creates tension that no amount of endorsements can fix. The emotional breakdown, then, wasn't just about stress or injury, it symbolized the clash between who Angel Reese is as a player and who she wants to be as a public figure. And as that gap widens, it leaves one looming question hanging over. Her career? Is she sabotaging her own future in the WNBA on purpose? Or has she already decided her path lies elsewhere? As the dust settled from the breakdown and all the swirling narratives, injury excuses, overseas rumors, social media drama, one truth became impossible to ignore. The biggest problem facing Angel Reese may not be her back, her teammates, or even the Chicago Sky. The biggest problem might be Angel Reese herself. Everywhere she goes, controversy seems to follow, leaving behind fractured locker rooms and skeptical fans. While supporters argue she's misunderstood, the repeated pattern of suspensions, emotional meltdowns, and high-profile exits paints a much harsher picture. For Chicago, the issue is especially glaring. A franchise that desperately needed stability and leadership instead found itself dragged into a national conversation about one player's attitude. Teammates who should be bonding on the court were instead forced to answer questions about Reese's absence, her credibility, and her future. The silence from many of them spoke volumes. In sports, when a locker room no longer trusts its star, the fallout is almost always catastrophic. And Reese's body language during her breakdown, isolated, emotional, disconnected, seemed to confirm that her bond with the Sky had been severed beyond repair. League executives are watching closely too. The WNBA has been working hard to expand its audience, capitalize on rising stars, and push past old stereotypes. But Angel Reese's saga has become the kind of headline they'd rather avoid. Instead of celebrating competition and growth, the conversation has been hijacked by accusations of selfishness, victimhood, and misplaced priorities. When a player becomes bigger for drama than for production, teams start wondering if the baggage is worth the talent. And yet, Reese continues to project an image of resilience and self-belief. To her fans, she's a fighter who refuses to conform, someone unafraid to challenge the status quo. But to her critics, that same defiance looks like arrogance, a refusal to take accountability when things go wrong. They argue that Reese has mastered the art of playing the victim, flipping narratives so that teammates, coaches, and even the league itself shoulder the blame. While she maintains her superstar persona online, the harsh reality is that a change of scenery won't automatically fix the problem, whether it's Chicago, another WNBA team, or an overseas contract. Angel Reese will still be Angel Reese. If she doesn't confront the issues head-on, her consistency, her leadership, her relationship with teammates, then the same problems will follow her wherever she plays. You can switch cities, coaches, and even countries, but you can't outrun your own reputation. That's why this moment feels so pivotal. Reese is at a crossroads, double down on her current path, where social media and endorsements overshadow her career, or recalibrate and prove that basketball still comes first. If she chooses the former, she risks becoming another cautionary tale of wasted potential. If she chooses the latter, she still has time to rebuild her legacy. But one thing is clear, Angel Reese can no longer blame anyone else. The spotlight is on her, and her next move will determine whether she's remembered as a rising star who lost her way, or as the player who fought back and silenced her critics once and for all. Angel Reese's emotional breakdown during the live game wasn't just another headline. It was the culmination of months of tension, controversy, and doubt. What should have been remembered as just one tough night has instead become the defining image of her season, a star in tears, sidelined and surrounded by questions about her heart for the game. Fans, teammates, and analysts are now left to wonder if she has the resilience to bounce back, or if her career will continue to spiral into drama and division. For Chicago Sky, the incident exposed deep fractures, while for Reese, it created a crossroads she cannot ignore. Is she a future cornerstone of the WNBA, or a fleeting name destined to fade under the weight of her own choices? One thing is certain: her next steps will either rebuild her reputation or confirm the doubts that have already begun to define her legacy.